Hello, everybody, and welcome back to What Culture. We are here with another lovely horror podcast for you, hosted by me, Ash Millman, and joined by he, Josh Brown.
Hello.
And by she, Kirsten Ria.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking to you about horror movie endings, because we spoke about horror movie openings last week and kind of the effect that they have on an overall movie. So the only way to bring it full circle and complete the cycle is to talk about endings as well, because what came up a lot last week was even though openings can kind of be bad or misused, you can still get on with a horror movie and really enjoy it. But the last moment, the final sting, is what sticks with you and kind of what brings you back to a movie again and again and makes you think about it and kind of has it as a good or a bad horror movie. Or at least that is what I would argue. What do you guys think about horror movie endings as a whole? Do you think that they are integral, important things, or do you think, as long as it's got a good bulk, you can kind of tail away?
I think it's make or break for pretty much every story ever, no matter whether it's horror or not, but especially for horror, because you want everything that's been built up to be paid off. Because I think, horror as a genre especially trades in suspense and mystery, and it always has you guessing as the plot progresses. So if all of that kind of immersion into the narrative and investment into the narrative is for naught, it really does feel like you've been burned. And I do think having a bad ending that either doesn't kind of do justice to what came before or doesn't have anything surprising or, level shifting up its sleeve, just kind of does a disservice to the rest of the entire movie, at least for me. I think openings, like we said last week, very important, but they're not make or break in the same way that a good climax is.
Absolutely. What do you think,
no,
Kirsten?
I agree. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that a bad horror movie ending, or for any genre really, but mainly for horrors, can completely ruin an entire film, because there's been so many horror movies where like the whole film I've been holding on thinking this is going to be good, this is going to be good, and it just has a completely crap ending, and you just almost forget like everything that's been building up to that point, because you're just so focused on like, what the hell have I just witnessed? Like, that's not how I can end it. And I think that it has to have that integral payoff at the end, whether it's sort of like the death of the psychopath or maybe the fact that they've lived and they will go on killing, and it's just nice, whether it be a twist or a good wrap up, whether it's a happy ending or a bad ending, it has to be good. It doesn't matter if they all live or they all die, it just has to be good. You can't just kind of just poo-poo it at the end and just like it doesn't matter, like whatever, we'll just it's a write-off. It has to be good.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. I have to ask the question of whether you think it, but I think we all agree that horror movie endings are absolutely integral. The piece that makes the movie. If you go out on a bit of a whimper or a bad fart, then that's what the whole movie stinks, doesn't it? Stinks of fart.
Nothing worse.
Horrible. Boff smelling horror movies. But I think with that in mind, though, horror movie endings in particular are probably some of the most divisive out there, and some of the ones that have a lot of differing opinions on what makes a good one and what makes a bad one, and whether they're enjoyable and whether they're not. There are a lot that are universally praised as being people's favorites, as being the best of all time, but there are a lot of nuanced choices that kind of bring something experimental to the table that lots of people go, ooh, actually, no, thank you. And a whole other bunch of people be like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. I am enlightened.
I mean, we've kind of mentioned it here. We've talked about it before, about how horror is probably the most accessible genre. So you get so many different people with so much personal preference about how they want something to play out. It's probably a topic for an entirely separate podcast, but I remember when we did a Chatty Faces a little while ago about which horror movie you'd want to be remade, and for me it was Lights Out, because I said in that when you reveal too much about the monster, you give it a proper origin or you give it too much explanation, it kind of robs something from the horror, at least for me. And I thought that was quite a common take, but then I saw in the comments people saying, no, we want resolution, we want explanation and stuff like that. So I think that's why horror movies in particular are so divisive, because we just have different expectations of what we want. If a horror movie ending goes far too down the exposition rabbit hole and starts explaining far too much, it robs some of the mystique that came before. For me, and not to talk too much about bad ones, but Ghost Stories is a really great British horror movie that I love. It's this anthology thing. But for me, the wrap up of that film was so neat and kind of so smart. It was almost too smart for its own good that it sucked all of the mystique out the rest of the movie, at least for me personally. I know not everyone agrees with that, but I think
that's a wild take. That is a wild take from what I've seen about the ending of this movie.
That's the Martin Freeman one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people love it, and I can see why they love it, but it's very much what kind of brand of horror you're in for, which is what I love. I love that diversity of, takes and appreciation for the genre. And yeah, that one might be Mad Ash. My mate Patrick always has a go at me when I say that, so I'm very much in the minority on that one.
I enjoyed the ending. I feel like the film as a whole kind of hit and miss for me. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great horror movie. But for my personal taste, I was like, meh on it. And then the ending kind of spun it into something else where I kind of feel like I stand away from that and respect it as a movie. I don't really have a take on it anymore because I'm just like, oh, okay. It does lots of things. I don't know how I feel about any of them. But yeah, I'm just going to kind of jump.
Oh, sorry.
What were you going to say, sir?
I was going to say, that's also interesting in itself. Like, what do you want from a horror movie ending? Do you want something visceral and thrilling? Or do you want something that you can, like you said, almost take a step back from and go, oh, that was smart. That was good. I respect that a lot. Because for me, it changes on movie to movie. Sometimes I want to be kind of shocked above all else and moved above all else, whether it makes sense or not. And other times, I'm there to kind of appreciate it as a piece of art more than anything else,
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of endings out there that absolutely just, like I say, they're experimental. They go a bit wild, do something different, and it hits different for different people. So to have that as like a jumping off point, I'm going to bring up Identity. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Have you seen Identity? The one with the guy, the ending basically is that it's about everyone in this weird motel that is dying one by one, and actually a figment of one man's imagination. Now, I love this movie, and I love that ending. And loads of people slam it all the time, and I think it's so good. And yes, it is one of those very neat, wrapped up with a bow kind of films. But I think it's such a good ending, that it's such a neat idea and an interesting concept, and maybe it isn't executed in the best way, but I'm all for supporting a film that like puts its ideas on the table and says, here, have them. And I feel like Identity absolutely slaps down its hand and goes, oi, take a look at this. How do you feel about it? It maybe goes a twist too far by the end, but I like what that film does. I like how schlocky it is. I like how dumb it is, but I know it's one that is absolutely ragged on by the horror community. What do you guys think about Identity?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never seen anyone have such a passionate defense of Identity, because like you said, that is very much almost the poster child for bad twists in horror. But I respect that a lot. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot to be gleaned from horror movies like that at least try to do something new. They might not nail it in the execution, like you said. Sometimes they might get too carried away and go one twist too far, like you said. But for me, as long as it makes thematic sense with what came before, and it's not just there purely to provoke or to kind of shock and to have something extra, I'm usually for it, even the ones that I don't necessarily like, because, you can still appreciate how it's been woven into the rest of the story. And then, like we just said there, kind of stand back and go, well, that might not have been for me, but it did make sense. It made sense for the story. It is something to talk about, something interesting to discuss on podcasts like this. So I'm kind of here for it. I'm not a huge fan of Identity, but I kind of, I respect that it's there. I respect that it's still talked about today in a way that some good horror movies from that era just are forgotten about.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I've seen Identity once. It was many, many, many years ago. It was like on one of the horror channels, and I couldn't sleep, and it was on. And I've only seen it once, and I know I really enjoyed it, and I really liked the ending, so much so that I've obviously just not watched it again, because I was like, no, that was good enough. I'm happy. Like, I don't know. And then I think with a twist like that, that's the only problem that I have with twists, where it's such a twist that you're like, oh, I can't really watch that again now. It's that's the only like downfall I think with a twist like that, is that the rewatchability. You might rewatch it again to kind of pick up on clues that you might have missed before, but to get that like initial shock that you got the first time, you're just never going to have that again. You're never going to experience that again. And I think that's the only shame with like twists like that. But yeah, I liked Identity. I'm with you, Ash. I thought it was a very good film, but maybe that was because I watched it about 15 years ago. So maybe I wouldn't have the same opinion on it now, but I liked it anyway.
Identity was actually, when I was younger, I think this is why I probably like it so much. It was this film that was whispered about. My best friend was really into horror movies, and I was a very sheltered child who couldn't handle watching them. When I was young, I could not handle horror at all. And my best friend loved them and used to just tell me all the plots of them. I didn't want to watch them, but I wanted to know everything about them. So she'd come and sit me down and describe all the plots to me. And Identity was the one where I had to ask her so many times to tell me more about it, what had happened in it, all this sort of thing. And I was like, I've got to see this Identity at some point in my life. And I remember sitting down to watch it, knowing everything that was going to happen in it, because I'd heard it from my friend and spoke about it so many times. And was like, oh, the whole way through, because I was reliving my childhood watching it. But
it's so weird. How Identity is almost like a cultural touchstone for a lot of people kind of around our age or whatever. For me, the poster of Identity or the DVD cover or whatever, to me, that's iconic. I think of horror, I see that poster. It's mad because considering I've seen it 2 times in my entire life. But in the same way, that was a film that my dad would watch when I was younger. And I'd think, oh, what's this? This is a bit dark. This is a bit scary. I'll have a bit of this. And then eventually got around to watching it a few years later and thought, it's all right.
It's absolutely the peak. I shouldn't be watching this, but I'm gonna. When you're younger, I love it. I love Identity.
Start off horror film.
Oh, perfect. But yeah, talking about horror movie endings that maybe are divisive and maybe only a few people love and can really appreciate. We should probably move on to our favourite ones, the ones that have stood the test of time, that have stuck with us, that deserve the big shout out. We're going to talk about the best horror movie endings, and there are so many and so many different types and so many different things to dissect about what we like about horror endings, but we're just going to jump in with the ones that do it really, really well. So yeah, either of you, hop on in here, tell me your favourite horror movie ending, let us break it down.
Go on, Kirsten, go.
Okay, let me just quickly remind myself, because as I've been sat here, I've been thinking about some other ones which are really good. So while I'm quickly looking, I just want to shout out quickly the ending to 1408, because it's got 2 different ones, and I can't remember. There's a really bad one. There's a universally hated one, and I'm pretty sure that's the one that I saw first, and I was like, oh, that kind of sucked, and completely ruined the whole film for me. However, when I then watched the good ending, or not good ending, but the better ending, that film was just then oh, what an amazing film that was. And it's the one where basically poor old John Cusack ends up dying. He sets the whole room alight, the whole building alight, the whole hotel. And he ends up dying, and Samuel L. Jackson goes to his funeral, and he's got all of his stuff and things in the box. I'm pretty sure this is a good ending. I can't remember the bad ones. So
I like the one where he dies.
And yeah, it's just really good because obviously, you think that he's put this curse to rest and all that sort of stuff. And he goes to the funeral, he tries to give it to his wife, and she's like, no, I don't want his stuff. And so he plays back this recording. And there's this one point in the film where he's talking to a hallucination of his daughter. So the whole thing is made out to seem that he's hallucinated it. It's just ghosts. It's not real. And he's just tried to kind of put this whole thing to rest. And there's this big sort of speculation as to whether 1408 is actually cursed or whatever. And Samuel L. Jackson listened back to it. And I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about it. He listens back to it, and it's John Cusack just talking to himself. And you're thinking, yeah, he's just hallucinated it. He's crazy. But then you hear his daughter's voice on the recording. And it's just the saddest thing ever. And you're like, oh no, poor John Cusack. She was there. She was physically there. The room actually made her exist. And it's just the best ending. And Samuel L. Jackson having that realization, oh my God, this stuff actually happens. And it's just the best ending. But yeah, I'll let Josh take another one, and I'll go back to one of my other ones. But I just thought of 1408 and just how good that ending was. And I was like, I have to shout that out, because it's just a classic example of, if a movie is released with a bad ending, it can completely ruin the whole thing. And 1408 is the perfect example of that, because then when you rewatch it with a decent ending, the whole film is just incredible then. It's just that is the ending it needed. And I don't understand why anyone would go with a different ending to that film, because it's just awful. So yeah, 1408 is brilliant. If you for some reason haven't seen it, then friggin' watch it, because it's an incredible movie.
You know what? I can't remember anything about 1408. I watched it not even that long ago, so I don't know which ending I got. And I remember enjoying it. Just for some reason, it's just completely slipped my mind. But one movie that will never slip my mind is Eden Lake, which came out a little over 10 years ago now, and is one of my favorite horror movies ever. It's this British set thriller, essentially about this couple who are just trying to kind of like chill out in the woods by a I think it's like a seashore or a riverbank or something like that. They're just trying to have a nice little day out, essentially. But they get terrorized by this gang of youths who are horrible, and they terrorize them. And one of them gets killed and the other one gets terrorized. So you're following this woman all the way through, and these are kids. So although they're terrible, you're kind of like a bit conflicted about hurting them back, because ultimately, they're very young. Anyway, she does kill one of them, and she manages to escape right at the very end, bloody, bruised, everything like that. She gets in a car, drives off, and she drives into the nearby town, and she's kind of like stumbling around, and someone's having a house party, and all of these adults kind of take her in, take her to the bathroom, kind of get her washed and stuff. And then while she's in the bathroom, she hears the kids that were terrorizing her come home, because that's their house. And they come in and you see like their parents kind of like talking to them, trying to figure out what's going on. And then kind of like it suddenly turns. Suddenly she's not in this safe space anymore. She's exactly where she doesn't want to be. She's in this den of wolves. And then she's trapped in this bathroom, and the parents are kind of like banging on the door, trying to get into her and stuff. And that kind of inversion of thinking you're safe and then realizing you're in literally the worst place you could ever be. It sends chills up my spine, because not only is that horrifying, but I think the characters in that movie are so well drawn. Like, those terrible kids are so believable, like horrible, violent, extreme bullies that you would kind of know from growing up in Britain, I suppose. And the parents, you can kind of see why they're doing what they're doing as well, because I feel like a lot of parents in that situation would kind of snap into that protective mode for their kids. No matter what horribleness they've done, they would automatically, take their side, and they would assume that in this situation where it's a grown-up versus a bunch of kids, the grown-up has to be in the wrong. So yeah, they end up kind of doing not very nice things to her and smashing the door down. And for some reason, like this especially, there have been so many horror films I've watched that have had dour endings, but this manages to just get under my skin every single time, and kind of the intensity of that final scene. It is so grim, it is so hopeless and horrible, and it entirely fits with that movie.
Oh man, speaking about this, there's something to be said for the horrible horror movie ending, because there's like 3 that I think of that are my favorite endings, like, of horror movies ever. They're not like the big massive ones, which is also interesting that we've gone for kind of our niche choices. But I love a downer ending in a horror movie when it's done well and like has the gut punch. Holy moly. And the one I probably want to talk about for me would be The Lodge, that I watched most recently, because it's such a brutal ending. I don't want to spoil it for you guys. Have you seen it?
No, still no.
But I'm gonna have to. No, it's okay, right.
Do it.
I think about the best thing to do
it.
but
go on.
We're going to talk about The Lodge. If you haven't seen it and you're watching this, go and watch it before you listen to me talk about it, because it's really good. It's Hereditary on ice. And it's about this new girlfriend of a man who has kids. And the opening is the man and his kids and his ex-wife, who is divorcing to get married to this new woman. I can't remember all the names at the moment because I'm just thinking about all the horrible things that happen. But it opens with the soon-to-be ex-wife and her kids going over to the dad's house to like spend the time there. And the wife goes away, hearing that he's going to marry this new woman, and just shoots herself in the head, like straight away. And it's like it sets a tone from there. It's a horrible, nasty, grim movie. And it goes on, and these kids, like months later, are sent to a cabin with the dad and his new girlfriend, who they blame for their mother's death, to try and like bond and be together over the Christmas period in this like wintry cabin, isolated in the middle of nowhere. That's a recipe for a disaster. It's a recipe for a disaster. And this new girlfriend, she met the father because she was part of an old cult. And he wrote a book on that. Basically, it's not really like spoken about explicitly, but it's hinted at that she was in a cult. He wrote a book on it, and she was brainwashed, and then she's broken out of it, had loads of treatment, is on lots of drugs, but is okay now. And what happens is they go to sleep watching The Thing, which is another great movie ending we should talk about. They go to sleep watching The Thing and wake up, and all the food's gone, the lights are all out, the electricity's gone, the house is just a husk, and the 3 of them, this girlfriend and the 2 kids, are stuck in this house, and they kind of think they're in limbo. They think they've died from a faulty gas heater, and it's them kind of trying to get through that together with these 2 kids that hate this woman. and this woman who's just trying to survive, and her drugs have disappeared as well. The ending is from hearing that, what do you think the ending will be?
I couldn't guess. You mentioned that limbo thing. I don't know. Actually, honestly, like I'm.
So they think they've died.
They think they've died. They found a flyer with their own funeral on it at one point.
Right. Well, I think because her drugs have because her drugs have gone, that she's possibly going to hallucinate and maybe kill the children.
Is it some mad intervention thing? Is it all a setup?
Interesting.
Come back to us.
Interesting choices. Basically, it comes about the one of the little boy pretends to hang himself and still be living. Afterwards, he's like, "Oh, we can't die. I've tried to die and I can't die." Come full circle. These two kids go down to the basement, go into a crawl space, and they have hidden everything and done this and pretended to be in limbo with this woman, sent her into a psychological breakdown, who now thinks she's dead. And the dad arrives to come back to be like, "Hi, everyone, I've come back from wherever the hell I've been for this whole movie." And she shoots him. And then the three of them have to sit and live together in this cabin. And it ends with them singing a hymn together, just like, and these two kids are like, because they're obviously traumatized from their horrible actions. And this girlfriend is there like, "Oh, I've got frostbite on my nose and I'm now rendered incapable of normal thoughts. I'm back into my cult of mind watching." It's so harrowing. It is such a good ending. And I just don't think you can beat the downer ending in a horror movie. And that is like the peak of it for me recently.
I tell you what,
good.
if I had kids like that, they'd be grounded forever. I think after that.
Absolutely.
That's too far, you know.
Why
too
does
much.
she shoot the dad? Just because she's caught off guard, she shoots the dad, or she just shoots him for no reason.
He comes in and is like, "You're imagining things. Like, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Like, I can see that everything's good. It's Christmas Day, babes." And she's holding this gun, going, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We can't die. We can't die." And it's like she goes to shoot herself, and a blank bullet comes out, so it doesn't kill her. And then when she goes to shoot the father, expecting him to not die, because obviously nobody can die as they're in limbo, she kills him. Like, it's so good. It's so good.
Man.
It's rank. It's a rank movie.
That sounds like an absolute bummer of an ending, but I love that because it's like, you know, when it comes to that situation, none of us could really guess what was going on there. So I think that kind of double whammy of it being nasty as hell anyway, but also subverting anything that you expect is kind of the nice recipe for a good horror movie ending, at least in my opinion. I want something that surprises me, yet something that's also kind of like satisfying and pays off what's come before, which that sounds like it does in spades.
It's good. Oh, sorry, Kirsten, what are you going to say?
So no, I was just going to say, I think that's the best part about a good twist, is one that if you're watching a film and you think, well, I think it's going to end this way, if it ends the way that you think it ends, then it's not a good twist because people have called it. If it ends in a way that you just completely didn't expect, like, you know, me and Josh have both guessed off of our horror knowledge what we thought could possibly be the ending there, and we didn't get it. So therefore, it is a good twist. And that is what I think is when people get that right, is when you physically cannot see it coming.
Yes, definitely. Twists are a whole different beast of their own, I think, when it comes to horror movies, because if they pull off a good one, then they are relegated to legend for all time. Like The Sixth Sense, like that is like labeled as the twist movie. The Descent, I know you've spoke about that. It'd be one of your favorite twists, Kirsten. The Mist, we talk about it all the time on the channel. We talk about The Mist all the time because it is the ultimate twist, downbeat ending. It is so good. And then when they flip it up, twists also relegate them to legendary halls of fame, like The Happening. Like even when that was bad, that got relegated to halls of fame. So twists are such a whole beast of their own when it comes to horror movies, that getting them right is amazing. Getting them wrong still works really well for them if it's goofy enough.
Well, yeah, like we've been saying, all of like even if it's a bad twist and it's not a good movie, we'll still be here making videos about them years later, talking about identity, talking about The Happening and these movies that just monumentally messed up. But like the movies we mentioned there kind of seem to have a very definitive ending. But for me, sometimes it's like the ambiguity of an end that kind of like really stays with me. Like the other one I was going to talk about, sorry if I'm jumping anyone here, but it was a Shutter, which doesn't kind of end with like the main character dying or anything, but it ends with kind of them in a very bad spot, but you not sure how the rest of their life is going to play out. And for me, that's almost scarier than seeing someone kind of like die or seeing a resolution. Kind of like the idea of someone being stuck in this nightmarish situation and not being able to get out of it. Like just kind of ending on a downer, but the lack of finality, I think that's kind of part of it. The lack of closure is something that I think horror movies capitalize on so well to kind of make you get to the credits and then still feel unnerved because you haven't had any kind of, there's no natural shut-off point to the story, you know what I mean? Because the story keeps going.
I think another one to mention there would be Absentia for the ending of that one. Just like, as in, you do get a wrap up to your story, but it's a lot of interpretation and nothing is resolved. It's just everyone succumbs to this nasty thing that is happening to them. And Wreck as well, ultimate horror movie ending that scarred me for life, for long afterwards. That was the first like found footage, oh my God moment I had, seeing that horrible hammer wielding monster in the loft. And it pulling Angela away and that just being the end. Like, nothing's resolved. There's a horrible monster in a loft. There's a plague running free.
It's funny that, because like obviously, you know, like the entire structure and formula of a found footage movie kind of dictates that it ends a specific way. It's almost a joke that all of them end with like the main character being dragged off, the camera tilts, it falls to the ground, it cuts to black. And yet, even with that knowledge in mind, I've seen so many of these damn movies. I still love them. I still love that resolution because it's tried and tested. It works. And I love seeing how directors kind of flex within that space and kind of manage to put their own stamp and do something new on something that should be robbed of all tension because you almost can guarantee what the final shot's going to be. Yeah.
The Visit and, what's the other one? The Visit, absolutely. And The Tunnel is the other one where they don't necessarily die at the end, but nothing like it. The Visit, things get resolved. The Tunnel, things don't. They go into like a tunnel system and it's like, oh, what's this crazy monster? And they come out going, oh, what's this crazy monster? I don't know. The Visit as well. I love it when they survive at the end, give a reason for it, make a nice little film out of it. And it's just like, hey, look at this spooky phenomenon that's happened. I don't know what's going on here.
Have you guys...
Sorry.
So I was going to say, have you seen found footage, one that I came across years ago, and it turned out to be surprisingly good, called Grave Encounters?
Yeah.
And it's just such like a piss take of like ghost adventures and stuff, which I like at the time loved. But that's another one that has like, it's like a found footage, but then it's also comes across as like a mockumentary where there's like they're interviewing like the producer and stuff, but then it ends in a completely sort of stagnant way where this guy is just sort of like, oh, well, I guess he's just got to live in this sort of limbo mental hospital forever now. And it's just such an ending that I just didn't see coming. It was one of those films that when I started watching it, I was like, well, this is going to suck. Like, what a complete like piss take of a film. And it actually turned out to be all right. So if you've not seen Grave Encounters, I'd highly recommend watching it for like a quick little, like horror movie to get a little laugh out of, because it's actually quite good. I was pleasantly surprised by that film, actually.
Oh, I enjoy Grave Encounters. I watched the second one not so long ago as a refresher. And the first one stands up so much better than the second one. The second one's still like goofy, good fun at least, and they kind of address the ending of the first one.
I was with like you guys. I was so surprised by that because we just put it on like a long time ago, expecting something naff, and it was quite surprising and actually quite scary. It has something that terrifies me in any horror movie, and that's kind of the idea of like this nightmarish dreamland kind of unreality where time is more or less meaningless and you can't fight against the literal kind of space that you're in. You know, like the way that kind of hospital shifts and the way that nothing makes sense. That is something that is deeply rooted in horror for me that properly scares me, the idea of being in the situation that you can't logic your way out of because nothing makes sense and you're going to get stuck there and you're essentially in an alternate dimension you might as well be that's just made of pure nightmares and horribleness and nastiness.
Yeah, the whole like being left to your own horrible fate in the nightmare dimension of nastiness, as you say, is rancid. But one I'm going to bring up, because we've got to talk about some of the big hitters, the big heavy hitters here. One I'm going to bring up that roots itself firmly in reality, that is so heart-wrenching. Another downbeat ending that has lasted the ages is Night of the Living Dead. I think that's one of the like lasting horror movie endings where it's like he has done everything right to get himself out of this situation, opens the door and is like, oh, freedom, I'm sorted, I've survived the zombie apocalypse, and gets shot. Like, it's just, it's so harrowing. It's such a good movie and so ahead of its time for the way that it addressed everything in it. It's such a great film, Night of the Living Dead.
100%. Like that is that's like one of the endings and one of the movies that got me into horror movies. You know what I mean? Because like even though I had seen that in so many kind of like YouTube videos or people talking about it on TV because it's so kind of iconic and so, like you said, ahead of its time. But it doesn't lose any of its impact. I must have seen that movie about 10 times now. And every single time I see that scene, you always kind of tense up just as Ben kind of like pokes his head out like the window. He's finally free. He survived the night. And then ultimately, like all of the zombie movies in the entire world, it's humans that are the most dangerous creatures. Yeah, like that is something that just kind of, like we said earlier, punches you right in the gut. But then at the same time, like all great horror movie does, it gets you thinking not only about the text, but then, the wider cultural themes and stuff like that. So for me, even though there are other Dead movies I like more, I don't think any of the Dead movies have a better or more or tighter ending.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, like I said, having an ending where you really feel something for that character by the end, to sort of watch them go through so much to ultimately, like you said, be killed by something so simple as a human being. They've gone against monsters or zombies or demons or ghosts or whatever, and they've managed to make it out alive, and then to be simply killed by a human with a gun who's just kind of misinterpreted the situation. It's horrible to watch. You're just like, no, this can't happen. I can't witness this person go through so much and just have them, they're coming for you, Ash. It's such a horrible ending to witness, to see someone go through so much and then just have it ripped from them when they think that they finally made it.
Yeah, Night of the Living Dead, absolutely one of the top tier ones. But The Shining as well, I'm gonna have to bring up because we haven't spoken about that yet. And Don't Look Now as well are two of the like lasting horror movies. Oh my God, look at these endings. The Shining maybe for an ambiguous one that we don't really understand or get, and Don't Look Now for an ambiguous one that we don't really understand or get, because both of them do that whole twist in very different ways, but again are ones that have lasted the ages. And the thing as well, for an ambiguous one, you don't really get like they are the ones that last the test of time, because you are always talking about them, having them in conversation, coming up with new theories. They are wonderful, wonderful endings. Are there any others that you guys kind of want to bring up as like, oh, hell, this is one of the best endings we've got to talk about?
I briefly mentioned it earlier, and I don't know, because it's hard, right? Because if we're talking about like the all-time greats, all the ones you've just mentioned there, along with The Wicker Man for me, like going over that hill, seeing the big Wicker Man itself, having just such a downbeat ending of this policeman being set on fire and everyone kind of hand in hand in this pagan ritual. The Exorcist for me is one of the all-time scariest, even though it's quite straightforward, more or less. And we've seen similar exorcism scenes over and over again. But I've got to shout out Shudder, which I did mention earlier on. And this, the original, the Thai original, which came out in 2004, not the remake. The remake's bad, but it still has this final scene. So the whole movie is essentially this couple being haunted by this ghost, because this ghost has been appearing to a bunch of men around the city and getting them to kill themselves. And this guy knows that he's next because he knew who the ghost was. But then it transpires that she's actually haunting him because he was part of some terrible, terrible thing that him and the rest of these boys did to her. So it's kind of like just desserts. But all the way through the film, he's been complaining about having this bad back because the only way they can really see the ghost is if they take pictures. So he's got this bad back. He's complaining about it all the way through. And then at the end, when he's trying to, the girlfriend's left him and he's trying to figure out where she is because he's just being tormented. And she's not turning up on any of the photographs. And then he accidentally knocks the camera and it takes a picture of himself. And it transpires that she's been literally on his shoulders, weighing him down this whole time. Every time he didn't think she was there, she's literally been on top of him. It's like this guilt is literally weighing on top of him in the form of a ghost. And that to me was so spooky. I watched that when I shouldn't have watched it, when I was way too young, and I was so scared. I also had this creepy ghost girl on my own back. Unfortunately, I don't think I do. It would explain the bad posture, but that to me was kind of so terrifying. Again, it kind of links back to what we said before, like being lumbered in a situation that kind of death is almost too good for you. Death will be too much of a relief. You're just trapped in this nightmarish scenario forever. So I would definitely need to shout that out because, man, that has stayed with me forever.
Yeah, Shutter is brilliant. I saw the remake as well, and it actually did quite a good job. But yeah, for me, I think that I'm going to shout out a few because they're the ones that make you think that you're going to get a good ending, and then they do the old switcheroo, and it's like, ha, psych, you're dead. And that is Descent, where she basically thinks that she gets out alive and she scrambles up there. She gets in the car only to then realize that she's hallucinated everything, and she is still, in fact, in this cave, which is like a different meaning to the whole descent into darkness and then descent into her own sort of madness. It's just a brilliant ending. There's also the ones where I think it makes you think that you're on the side of the good guy, but then it turns out to be from the side of the bad guy. There's a brilliant Japanese film, I think it is, called A Tale of Two Sisters. They did do a remake with Emily Browning, which I can't remember the name of, but the whole time you're watching it, it makes it out to be as if like there's this evil stepmother and she's actually a serial killer or something like that. And then it turns out, actually, no, Emily Browning's been crazy the whole time and she's just hallucinating her sister, and she's just gone and killed her stepmother for no reason. And actually, the place that she's come from at the beginning, which makes it seem like she's from some sort of retreat, is actually like a mental hospital, and she's just super crazy and just evil. And just they're the good ones, the ones that make you think, oh, everything's all going to be nice and they're going to get revenge, or they're going to have their comeuppance or something, and it's like, oh no, oh, you're the bad guy, oh, okay, probably shouldn't have been supporting you then. Yeah, they're the ones that I really enjoy, is when they make you think you're going to get a happy ending, and then it completely flips it on its head, and it's like, nope, they're either going to die or they've been evil all along. They're very well done.
Oh, there's something to be said for the happy horror movie ending. Happy horror, oh my God, my words. The happy horror movie ending, though, because they're so rare and so rarely done well, that I also think that if they subvert the genre to that degree where they actually manage to do it and don't have to be horrible, like all the ones you've mentioned there, Kirsten, then I think that they deserve definitely like a bit of praise as well, like The Babadook and Tigers Are Not Afraid, actually managing to kind of have either a bittersweet or a kind of overcoming sort of ending where it's like, okay, all these bad things have happened, all this horror has happened to me, but I'm going to take it on board and grow bigger and stronger because of it. That's a great message to send, but it isn't in every movie. And it can't be in every movie because horror is scary. But I think that kind of brings us full circle to the question of, does a horror movie ending have to be scary to be a good ending? And does it have to does it have to do something spectacular, or can a movie just end?
Oh, it's a difficult question, because you would assume, because it's called horror, it would have to be scary. But like you said, there are exceptions to the rule where you can have something that is satisfying and still hopeful or happy or whatever. Or you can have something sudden that you don't expect. Like, you were talking there about a few examples. I would always point to An American Werewolf in London, which just kind of cuts to black right at the end where you think there might be more to come. So I think, it always helps. It always helps that the horror movie's ending is scary. Like you can't get away from that. But I think there are ways to get around that and deliver something that you don't expect, or something hopeful and happy in a similar way. But I think, just judging of all of the examples you used today, it feels like we prefer things that are either surprising or nasty or completely hopeless, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree with Josh. I think it depends on the movie as well, like you were saying earlier, Josh. Like, some films, they need to have a happy ending because you want to see them get their vengeance or something. Some films, it's nice to have that ending with Night of the Living Dead, where you've seen them go through so much, but then it's taken away from them. And then other films, I think, just completely work. Just having that ultimate, just go to black. What's going on? What does that mean? What happens? Where does it go from here? And then also having the endings where it just lingers on, like at the end of The Conjuring, where you've got the mirror scene where it's zooming in. You're like, is it going to happen? Is it not? And then again, it just kind of leaves you in that ambiguity of, wait, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is there another one? What happens? Is it gone or not? And yeah, I think it completely ends. It completely goes down to what the film itself is about and how it works. But it doesn't need to be scary. It doesn't need to be happy. It doesn't need to be bad. It just needs to be fitting and good and fitting within that movie itself, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree there that it's like, as long as it embodies the message of the film in a succinct, like final jabby kind of way, then that is perfect. If it's a happy one where it's like, oh, okay, they got over this is how you deal with grief, for example, and having that as like the succinct ending, great. If it's a horrible downbeat one where they're like, oh, actually everything's terrible and that's just how it be, then that's also great. And if they have ones where it's ambiguous, where it's like, this will always plague these people and we don't know why, maybe it'll get you, that's also great as well. Like It Follows, I love the ending of It Follows, where you just see the person walking behind and you're like, are they the monster? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to end this as a bad horror movie ending, we're going to wrap up this podcast now. So I don't have a good one for you. It's just, this is the end, which embodies our message perfectly. So if you enjoyed this, please come back again. We're doing these all the time at the moment as the Trident of Terror, I believe, the Scream team.
Both
team,
work.
Trident of Terror.
I got told off for saying Scary 3 last time. So, yeah, we're doing these a lot more often. So if you like them, please come back. Please message us on the hashtag on Twitter, which is #WC Horror. And you can tell us what you want to hear on here. You can ask us questions. You can do anything. We can make a lovely podcast just for you if you have a lovely idea about it. So please do that as well. You can catch us on social media as well. You can find me at Ash Millman. You can find Josh at
Josh Brune with 2 O's.
Lovely. And you can find Kirsten Rhea at
Kirsten Rhea with 2 A's.
Yes, that is good. I'm trying to think of anything else I need to plug here. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, come for more horror stuff. There's always more horror stuff. Look out for the horror stuff. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.